days ago, I saw Fabelmans, which was a film about Steven Spielberg, his youth, and it was hilarious. The last scene of the film was very hilarious, as he, as a 16-year-old, goes and sees John Ford, and John Ford gives him about a minute of his time, and he says, have a look at that painting there. Where's the horizon? He says, ooh, at the bottom. And he said, have a look at that painting over there. Where's the horizon? He says, ooh, at the top. He said, now come here. And he said, horizon at the bottom, that's interesting. Horizon at the top, that's interesting. Horizon in the middle, it's bloody boring. And I think Wes Anderson would disagree, and I sort of disagree with it as well. Wes Anderson has centralized everything, so those sort of rules don't exist anymore, but it's a funny scene. What I'd love to talk about today is the power of the image. I want us to talk about the artistry of finding our images, how we make our image evoke emotion, and see if sometimes what we don't see but imply is much more powerful. See how we find the 3-dimension out of the 2D image and make the audience interpret and involve themselves. And I think that's crucial. I think it's crucial that we involve the audience when we choose our images and how we choose our images emotionally. And I would like to talk with my panel here about just those sort of things. And I think images are often based in 3 different energies. Every image, to my mind, has an energy. So this first photograph I call the potential energy. It's called the suicide. Cartier-Bresson photographed this. Hopefully he helped him not throw himself off the top, but it's the potential energy. And it came from a photograph which I wanted to find, but I couldn't find, which was set in Paris in a cafe setting in the beautiful sunlit Paris street, where everybody was having a great time. There was an accordion player. There were the waiters laughing with people, lovers in the corner kissing each other and things like that. A happy, happy scene where you just felt the emotion of that place until you looked up the photograph and you saw a man having just thrown himself off a building from 6 floors up. And then the photograph became massively powerful. Then the photograph meant much more than just the image. You suddenly realized that a second later there'd be carnage. And I think that's a dramatic example, but I think within all our images we need to find that 3-dimension. And so that's potential image. So this is a photograph last week in Turkey after the earthquake. And that is a reflective image of something having happened, and you're reflecting on what has happened and the story behind it. So what I'm trying to imply always is that you constantly think of the story that you're trying to portray emotionally as an image when you make films. And it doesn't matter what kind of films, you should always be thinking of that. And this is a Diane Arbus photograph set in Central Park. This child has got a plastic grenade in his hand, and it evokes emotion. This is another image, and an image, for my mind, that has a visceral content. You know, nobody would want to have so many bees. It's called The Beekeeper by Richard Avedon. And if they all stung him at that same time now, he would die. So there's a sort of visceral aspect of it. And there's a film that I saw a long time ago called Three Colors Blue, where Juliette Binoche is going up to her house, and she's got a fist clenched, and on the way up to the house there's this wall, this stone wall, of which she's scraping her hand up this thing. It's agonizing to watch, absolutely agonizing to watch. And that's the visceral image. And you know, the Chien Andalou, which is the Brunwell film, in which you have an eye open and a razor cuts the eye. I can't watch it, but it's another visceral image. This is Vivian Maier, who, if you know about her, she calls it a self-portrait, and she was a shadowy figure all her life. Nobody knew she existed until she died, and somebody found all her photographs in a cellar somewhere. So it's incredible that she would shoot a photograph, a shadow of herself, in this image. This is by Martin Parr, and this is humorous, so it doesn't have to be heavy. It's humorous. This is Diane Arbus, emotional. If you know all her photographs, you know what sort of emotion maybe she's reflecting there. This is Don McCullen. This is in Vietnam. It speaks volumes. This is Soul Lighter. And the photograph is completely out of focus, and yet incredibly beautiful. And a friend of ours, Ed Lackman, loved Soul Leiter's photographs, and he made a whole film called Carol based on the imagery of this photographer. And I think all of us, when we read scripts, we go to paintings, we go, you know, see paintings, or we see photographs, or we see things that inspire us to make images work for the film. This is a Brassey photograph, and you sort of know what's going to happen there. This is one of Roger Deacon's favorite photograph, William Eggleston. And, you know, question yourself, is it better to look at this image and not see her face, or see her face? I would say that not seeing her face means that every one of us, as an audience member, can imagine her face. We see enough of her hair and her style and the style of the place to imagine it. And that's the three-dimensionality that I'm talking about. This is, I've written a script, and this is a photograph of a gypsy where I live. This is another one of Vivian Maier's photograph, always as a shadow. This is another Richard Avedon. This is a coal miner. I mean, look at his face. This is Northern Ireland. This is Don McCullen photograph. Says so much. This is Soul Lighter, which is absolutely stunning, of which Ed Lackman used many images like this of glass and not quite seeing everything, but implying stuff. This is Nan Goldin, that you know, Ellen, and this is Irving Penn. So it can be inanimate objects too. This is Nan Goldin again, about the culture she is. Many of us look at films and look at her work because of the coloring and the presence and the emotion of the people that she photographs. This is last week in Turkey. Unbelievable. That's after an earthquake. And this is the last one from Vivian Maier's as well. And that's reflective, a reflective image. So all these images say much more than the image themselves. And that's what I'd like us all to talk about. So I've got an incredible panel here of true artists who have done incredible films. And Ellen Kuras, who's here by my side, And I think possibly what we'll do, we'll look at the footage of what you've chosen, and then we'll talk about it. And you talked about the metaphor of images, and we'll talk about what you'd like to talk about. So let's have a look at Ellen's footage, please.
What's this war in the heart of nature?
Come, Spirit, help us sing the story of Anand.
There are two ways through life, the way of nature and the way of grace.
Eddie, just stop it there, please. And we'll go to the next one after we've had a little chat about Terence.
So the reason, hi everybody. Thank you, John. The reason why I chose Terrence Malick's work is because he's a classic example of a director who uses the image as visual metaphor. And that's what we're talking about here is, you know, how we use images as metaphor, as for meaning. So, because there's a very big difference between just making a cool shot and actually creating a shot which has meaning and narrative progression to it. So, you know, a long time ago, when I first started shooting, before I started shooting, I hired a cinematographer to start working on this film that I was working on. And I was kind of looking for the intersection between documentary and narrative at the time. And I sat down and talked to the cinematographer, who's a commercial guy. I didn't really know him. I didn't know anything about anything. And I tried to explain to him, you know, thematically what I was trying to go for. So we shot for 4 days, and this was on film way back when. And when I brought the dailies back, I started looking at the dailies, and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, you know, they're really beautifully shot. They're very competently shot. But I thought, something's missing. What is that that's missing? And I felt I didn't know at that moment, because I decided to pick up the camera myself to find out what that was. And I realized that it was about meaning. You know, the images were really cool, but they didn't tell a story. I didn't discover anything through them. So when I picked up the camera, I started filming this Laotian family. And there was an old grandmother who was sitting in the doorway, this refugee who was sitting in the doorway cutting up fish. And I had my camera with the zoom lens, and I decided to put the camera outside this cinder block house that she was in, which was the antithesis of a house that she grew up in, that she came from in the jungles of Laos, lush green, wooden houses, nature all around. And I zoomed all the way in, and fortunately it was backlit. I mean, I didn't know anything then, but I opened up the door and I realized that, I could get her cutting the fish in silhouette. And then I started pulling out on the zoom, and then you realize she wasn't in Laos. She was in this concrete kind of a bunker, project. And then over to my right, I realized there were a bunch of kids. And at that point in the 80s, the kids had these punk hair. They were all in leather. They had chains on. They were smoking. A totally different world because they had taken on American culture. And I pulled all the way out and then panned over to see these kids. And I realized, I said, that's the story that I wanted to tell. I was able to create a story with it. And that I think that we as cinematographers, when we're working on any project, whatever it is, whether it's documentary or a narrative, one of the most important things to remember is that you're thinking about what is the story? How do you want to tell this story? Where do you want to put the camera so that you can best tell the story of what the theme is of this film? So when I started doing documentary, I would ask the director, so what is it you want to say? What are you looking for? So I wouldn't just go and put the camera in a room or just get coverage, because there's a big difference between getting coverage and having an idea, a thread that carries you all the way through, that tells you what you're going to shoot and how you're going to shoot it, even if you're doing narrative. So that, you're talking about this character, the character, is, going through something, where to put the camera. So the thing with Terrence Malick is that he uses metaphor throughout all of his films. And, his images are really beautiful. And he chooses the light well. I mean, when they did Days of Heaven, Nestor Alejandro's shot, he insisted, and of course he was a lot luckier than we are now. We don't have the luxury of saying, oh yeah, I'm only going to shoot at daybreak and at magic hour, which is what they did. But what he did was he was trying to tell the story not only of this couple and this young girl who go out on the prairie, but he was telling the story of man versus nature, and the wheat fields. And, people in the beginning are threshing the wheat. They're taking the wheat with their hands. They're using pitchforks. It's all hand. And Nestor knew this. And so all of the images that he created in that film, had to do with nature and comparing nature. And I'm sure he was like, let's just shoot whatever we can of any animals that are walking around or insects. And the wheat becomes a character, and the way he shot the film really tells us that story. So it was really interesting when you see the images progress, as the story progresses, when the machines come to take over the role of the people, the way he shoots it, you viscerally feel, the age of industrialization coming upon you as you're in the theater. And so that's the thing that, for me is really important anytime I approach a film, because, the visual metaphor is going to, it helps you to talk about character, it helps you to underline the themes that the story is trying to tell or that the director is trying to pull forth, and point of view is something that's really key. Where do you put the camera? It's not only about shot, reaction shot, which is what I was telling John. It was like shot, reaction shot, it's like, it's thinking about that. You think, okay, where can I put this camera that's going to best tell the story of this scene? So, when you go to looking at a script and you come upon, you have all of these different scenes. So how do you approach them? Do you say like, oh, okay, this is a cool shot over here? Or do you say to the director, what's the meaning of the scene? What do you want to say with this scene? Because that's what's going to tell you where to put the camera, how to move the camera. So as John was saying, with still images, all of these photographers have chosen a certain atmosphere to put their characters. a certain lens to choose, a certain light. Like Avedon tends to use what I call the Avedon light. Having worked with him, he always uses this 20K behind the camera, with the big soft, diffusion in front of it. And, puts 2 4x4s on the side of the characters, and that has a certain kind of feeling of outlining the character, and it gives you this kind of emotion that John is talking about. It's like every little element that you bring into it creates meaning. It's not arbitrary, so.
It's perspective, isn't it? It's finding a perspective in the story.
Yes.
Which is absolutely critical.
We cinematographers have a lot to do with that. We can really sway how the story will be told, and that's where the craft comes in, about not only thinking about the technical part of it. The technical is one aspect of it. Part of the other thing is thinking about meaning and how can I embed the story in the subtext. When you're choosing a certain location, what works. It's not only about where you can put your condors. It is also about, creating that scene that has multiple layers. And John showed us that Don McCallum photo of the woman pushing the baby carriage across the empty, bombed out road, with the row of houses in the background. Immediately we start associating, what does that mean? We immediately have a sense of that story, even though it's a still image. I don't know, do you guys want to add to that? Sorry.
No, and Betrayal was the what you were talking about earlier, the documentary that you're talking about.
Yeah, that was the documentary.
And Ellen was nominated for an Oscar for that. And she's worked with, I'm looking at the list here, Scorsese, Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch, Terrence Malick, Michel Gondry, Sam Mendes. She's done stuff with Nan Goldin, Bowie, Bob Dylan. And that's New York, is it? Is that what happens in New York? Everybody bumps into each other.
Yeah. There's one cafe you can go to and everybody's hanging out.
Everybody's there. Oh, I wish it was like that here.
Yeah.
So let's just have a look at your next, possibly 2 things, so that we can go through
That's
there.
fine.
Now we've established the Terrence Malick feel. So let's do that, Eddie, please.
You're going to see Son of Saul and then a little bit from Eternal.
Stukken aus Autopsie. Wo sind? Ihr seid da geschickt. Verschwindet! Dr. Maggie Girte. Was?
Genau solche Leute brauchen wir in unsere Ateliers. Wenn Sie aus dem Bad kommen, dann melden Sie sich direkt bei mir. Wir brauchen dringend Krankenschwester. Muss der Platz weg. Wenn noch andere dabei sind.
Peter, bist du auch keinen Roll?
gelassen hätte. Und zwar alles so versalzen. Und gestern, weißt du? Bist du noch Brot?
No, geh bei uns dann out.
Ja. Oh, trinken, solange die hier noch kommen.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם המועצי לנו חוץ. דר מלחמו ושטן אלוקס צדיק.
Bringt noch eine Runde Sachen vom Krämer 4. Mach die Schleusen auf.
Los, Bewegung!
Der Name des Mädchens?
Gut. We'll call it off. I'll give you a sign. I want to call it off. Can you hear me? I don't want this anymore. I want to call it off.
Stop what? Jolie.
Come on. No. No. Come on. Concentrate, Clemmer. We gotta get back to the house. It was a tape recorder. No, not the picture. Not the picture. Back here. Come on.
Look at me. Hey, I haven't done that.
Look, our files are confidential, Mr. Barish, so I can't show you evidence. Suffice it to say that Miss Kraczynski was not happy and she wanted to move on. Good, now tell me about
Just tell me everything you remember. That's what he said. Then...
Let me see that day.
No, wait.
Oh, look! Hey!
Shit!
We're going to see my grandma. Joel,
No,
what?
we're not going on a train.
Joel, please, don't make me run anymore.
Come on! Where's React?
You always have to run.
Where's React?
Please.
So, why don't we begin by you telling me everything you can remember?
Where's React? Wake me up!
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barish. I thought you understood what was going on here.
I don't know. You're erasing her from me. You're erasing me from her. I don't know. You got this thing. I'm in my bed. I know it. My brain.
I'm part of your imagination too, Joel. How can I help you from there? I'm inside your head too. I'm you.
Sorry. Who's that?
Oh, he works for us. That's Patrick Lee.
stuff. He's seducing my girlfriend with my words and my things. He stole her underwear. Oh, Jesus Christ, he stole her underwear.
I could die right now, Clem. I'm just happy. I've never felt that before. I'm just exactly where I want to be. I want to go home. Clem! Wait, Clem!
Crazy.
I mean, I have to say, Eternal Sunshine, I would find it difficult to know how it's written, because so much of it's visual, so much of it is jump cuts and things like that. I mean, you can't really write that, can you, within a storyline? So was the original script more linear, and then on set, you played around with the images?
No, the original script was written completely out of sequence. So, we were jumping backwards and forwards in time. So, it was kind of tricky because it was like, okay, what am I matching to? And I realized, and this is what really helped me and everyone else, is that, the idea was he's in his mind. So he's talking about memory. He's searching in his mind's eye. So I thought, you know what? Anything goes. Because, when you really vicariously think about your memory and you try to, what does that mean? How can we put audiences into the idea that they're vicariously experiencing, him trying to, grab hold of memory? What does that mean? So that enabled me to understand that I could jump cut from one shot to the other. So when I thought of it as a chase sequence, where they're both running away from being erased, or she's running away from being erased and he's trying to help her hide from it. So I knew that I could I could try to visually express that. So one of the things was, how are we gonna light it? Because okay, do I use naturalistic lighting? Do I make things match? And I thought, you know what? No, I gotta figure out what is it, about your memory when you think about it, when you're dreaming, it could be anything. It could be a flash here. And then I thought, what's really interesting is, what is that light? How do we light it? So it's very funny. I was talking to Michelle about it, and we spent hours talking about how to make her disappear, because we knew that we wanted to do as much as we could in camera. I mean, one of the very few kind of shots that we had to doctor was in Grand Central Station when they're running away and the people go, because we didn't have any control in Grand Central at all. But I said to Michelle, I said, I want to come up with an idea that is a metaphor for what the light is when you think about your memories. So it's funny. We were looking at a lot of visual references. I was looking at paint peeling on glass. I mean, we were thinking about a lot of really outrageous stuff. And then he showed me a tiny clip from a French film, whatever, I don't even remember what it was. And it was of a car driving along a country road, and the camera was in the front seat, and the headlight was at night. The headlights were going, and the car turns the corner. And as it turns, the lights go on the embankment in front of it. And I'm like, that's it. I'm like, okay, great. That's what I'm going to do. That's going to be my memory light. So I realized that when you think about memory, it's almost like tunnel vision. It's like you're seeing only part of things. You're not seeing the whole image. You're not seeing everything. It's about what you don't see as much as what you do see. So I thought, I'm going to use it like a spotlight that, you're turning, and, the idea is you're looking for that, but you're only seeing certain things, and you're catching fragments of what's in front of you, trying to grasp on that memory. When you dream at night and you wake up in the morning and you're like, ugh, what was that dream I just had? So you're looking in your head trying to find it. So that's what we did. So then it was like the technique followed the idea. And that's kind of the way I've always worked, is trying to find the ways that you can express the idea. So I had a bicycle light. I mean, I tried all different kinds of lights to be able to do it. And I knew it had to be on the camera, moving around, or it could be independent. So sometimes when we were outside, we use a park can. But it was that idea of, there's the memory light. So sometimes we use it, sometimes we don't. So when they're on the chase sequence on the ice, I knew that not everything is perfectly exposed. I knew I wanted to have that sense of, okay, I'm going to blow that out, because I wanted to feel like it really is a fragment of something. And when I was doing Summer of Sam with Spike, I did the same thing with the murders. We did, we had a sequence of murders that were happening. And by the time the third murder was happening, I said to Spike, I want to do something different with the lighting. I want to, because we were using reversal. Sorry, I'm talking fast and I'm sorry. Okay. I said, I want to use reversal for this, and I want to take the lens out of the 6K par. I think they had just invented 6K pars back then, So I was like, all right, I want to take the lens out of the 6K par and sweep it over the murder scene. Because I thought, what's the idea behind that? The idea is that, we heard about 1 murder, 2 murders, 3 murders. It starts to become rote. And you, in your mind, and we all do this with the news, it starts to get abstracted in our head. So I thought, I'm going to show that the murders become an abstraction, after they're happening again and again and again. So, with Eternal, there are lots of different ideas at play, but, just talking about lighting and point of view, and, they all come into play about, the camera was always handheld. It was moving, always handheld and moving all the time, and trying to be able to, show these, I guess you could call them in-camera tricks, but they're not, they basically was about that one reality meshes into the other so that we take you there. So sometimes we were building sets within sets and then putting a set out on the street, like that one where, Jim is coming through the corridor. We built a set on the street, started on the set on the street, and then went into a location. So it's those kinds of things where we were taking reality and changing the reality of it. The Son of Saul piece is something, when I first saw that movie, and I think it blew a lot of us away when we all saw it for the first time, because, Matthias really took a lot of risks to say, I'm going to shoot this in a different way, to get into the mind's eye of this person, who's in charge of moving these bodies in a crematorium in the concentration camp. And how do you get to that feeling? And this is what you're talking about, emotion. It's like, how does the camera help us to feel the sense of claustrophobia, the sense of desperation, the sense of you're not seeing everything. Your world becomes very much enclosed. And, how do you get to that? And the way that he was able to do that, like bringing the focus all the way forward and being very selective about what we see. And also the quality of the image. It's not always about the fact that you have to have the sharpest lenses, the highest K. If it's 8K, that movie wouldn't have worked. So it's really about you looking at, using equipment, that we have lots of equipment, and there's fantastic stuff out there now. I mean, we can do stuff that we never were able to do in film. And what are your choices to be able to, you as cinematographers have choices to select from all of these to make choices that create meaning, like he did there. It really brought us into that world, and we felt like we were trapped in that world too. I mean, even seeing 2 or 3 minutes of that film, you start to go like, I've had enough. And you can imagine, it takes us right there. So, so those 2 pieces, and Eternal Sunshine, is something that, I thought a lot about, how do we tell this story, what's the point of view? And point of view actually is something that people forget about. And a lot of cinematographers forget about it. I forget about it sometimes. It's like, so what's the point of view? Where's the story being told? It's just not about coverage and putting the camera in the corner. You know, you're making choices. You have that choice. So you have to, you know, guide your directors in that place to say, oh, well, we do it here, and you help with the blocking. I'm always involved with the blocking of trying to get the actors to also maybe come to where I want them to, because, you know, blocking is incredibly important for the meaning of the scene. So, you know, you should be very proactive in working with them to do that.
I'm going to have to interrupt you. Oh. Hello? I'm going to have to interrupt you there.
Sorry, I'm just...
But, Ellen, thank you so much, and we could keep on talking for hours. Ellen's just finished directing a film called Lee about Lee Miller, which we're all going to be very looking forward to seeing. And now I'd like to go to Rob Hardy. And just so that you also realise, and that's why I think I got Rob Hardy to give us a bit of Mission Impossible and things like that. It's not purely about art house films, about films that are, you know, that you can take a certain stance on. It can be any regular film that any of us have to make, which are more straightforward. And Rob is going to now show us the films he's done, Mission Impossible and Ex Machina, both very different, and he'll talk us through his choice. So let's have a look at his footage, please.
C'était la mienne, ça dure pas? Non, c'est pas. Pour moi. T'en fais trop. Arrête de causer. Arrête. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait ce soir? Je suis bête, je comprends pas. Je sais pas, on va voir un Non, c'est pas qui aime. Non, mais allez. Toi, tu prends la bombe, toi. Non. Toi, tu prends la bombe. Toi, tu veux vraiment prendre la bombe, là? Where's the needle? Jesus Christ! What the hell was that? Everybody out! Go, go, go!
What do you think?
What's it a drawing of?
Don't you know?
No.
I thought you would tell me.
Don't you know?
I do drawings every day, but I never know what they're of.
You're not trying to sketch something specific? Like an object or a person? Maybe you could try.
Okay. What object should I draw?
Whatever you want. It's your decision.
Why is it my decision?
I'm interested to see what you'll choose.
Do you want to be my friend?
Of course.
Will it be possible?
Why would it not be?
Our conversations are one-sided. You ask circumspect questions and study my responses.
Yes.
You learn about me, and I learn nothing about you. That's not a foundation on which friendships are based.
So what, you want me to talk about myself?
Yes.
Where okay, where do I start?
It's your decision. I'm interested to see what you'll choose.
Okay, Ava. Well, you know my name.
Yes?
I'm 26. I work at Nathan's company. Do you know what his company is?
Blue Book. Named after Wittgenstein's nose. It's the world's most popular internet search engine, processing an average of 94% of all internet search requests.
That's exactly right.
Where do you live, Caleb?
Brookhaven, Long Island.
Is it nice there?
It's okay. I got an apartment. It's kind of small. It's very small. But it's a 5-minute walk to the office and a 5-minute walk to the ocean, which I like.
Are you married?
No.
Is your status single?
Yes.
What about your family?
I grew up in Portland, Oregon. No brothers or sisters. My parents were both high school teachers. And if we're getting to know each other, I guess I should tell you they're both dead. Car crash when I was 15. In fact, I was in the car with them. Back seat. But it was the front that got the worst of it.
I'm sorry.
Beautiful.
So a true artist, remarkably beautiful work. He's very specific about his framing. He always has been. He's quite difficult because of it.
Really difficult. Really tricky to work for.
Yeah.
With.
So let's talk about quickly Mission Impossible. With your understanding of image making and the way that you've done most of your other films, A Boy, etc., and all the other films that you've done, which are very specifically visually based, with emotional intentions, by doing something which is part of a franchise of which everybody sort of knows what they want out of it, were you able to put something else into it that is initially yours, that is different from Mission Impossible 1 or 2 or whatever the others are?
Well, I mean, the short answer is yes. Like, those 3 clips, to me, are all related. They're all very specifically related because they all deal with the concept of space. And to me, I've always had this idea that from the very beginning, when I first started out, that space, and I know this might sound really obvious, but is incredibly important. It's almost as if the space itself is the place in which the images will inhabit, right? And again, it sounds kind of obvious, but so as far as that, with that in mind, I've always sort of approached films, or the telling of stories at least, from a cinematography point of view, from the bedrock of understanding space. And so, you know, with those 3 clips, you have three very distinct spaces. The first being a white bathroom, the second being a square mile of Paris, and the third being a set built in Pinewood, which is, you know, part of the Ex Machina set. So to me, they were all the same. And in order to, my job, I feel, is like, or to an extent, in terms of telling the stories, or giving the actors the freedom and the director the ability to sort of use that space, is to really focus on the idea that we're inhabiting a 360-degree environment. So I saw that square mile of Paris as basically a 4-walled room, and the architecture there dictates to me, to my eye, how you would photograph it. So in a sense, the cameras are almost secondary. The lens choices, all of these things, of course, they're very, very important, but it's almost as if I was sort of, or I'm kind of less interested in, from the very beginning, is thinking about where the camera position is going to be, but I'm more interested in creating a space. And in the case of the bathroom, for example, originally as drawn or as designed, it was going to be this dark environment with these spotlights everywhere, and that Peter, the designer, had put together. And I was thinking actually almost the opposite in a way. But Peter and I do get one, and it was fine, and he was cool with it. But I won. But it was to me, it was just like less about what you don't see. It's almost as about what you want to show everything, and in showing everything, then you get to the heart of what the essence of the scene is about, which is you know, subterfuge, which then sort of descends into chaos. And to me, it's like I want the audience to. I want to sort of enable them to see and feel every single thing that's happening in that bathroom. And the same with Paris. And it's like in the square mile, you have lots of points where you can use velocity as an aesthetic, the kind of kinetic idea of that.
That's what you feel the most, I think, is that velocity, and actually beautiful images of motorbikes going through these arches.
It's also interesting as well, though, John, because coming back to really answering the question you asked is, with something like Mission, yeah, sure, it was a film on a huge scale, but really very, very different to a lot of other films of that scale, in the sense that what you have is, instead of a sort of a wall of execs somewhere over there in California, you have the one single person who everybody kind of not necessarily answers to, but is the sort of creative heart of that. And that person is right in front of the camera. And not only is that person in front of the camera, but they're also prepared to do anything and everything. So to me, it was almost like, well, it took me back to the days when I was shooting music videos, where you would inhabit a space for 24 hours, and it was always usually 24 hours, 16 to 24 hours, and you need to be prepared to look in any direction very quickly, but with the aim of creating beautiful images, and that's specific to the music video aesthetic. However, in this case, because we have somebody who is very practical, it made my job that much easier, because everything I could do then would become very practical. So I always said at the very beginning, I said to Tom, like, you know, my aim from a visual point of view for this film is to put the audience, is to sort of give a sense of proximity. And again, it comes back to the idea of space, which is this idea I'm sort of obsessed with. It's like that sense of proximity, that idea that you put the audience in the room.
You know what I found was interesting in the bathroom scene, and especially in Ex Machina, is that you question that space. So we are shifting that space.
Yeah.
So we're constantly shifting where we are,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting, because you know, it then becomes about something, you know, becomes about the space that you're in, but also about something else, about what's going on in the drama. It was really interesting.
It is, and I think it's you know, it creates a real sense of freedom. So yeah, I mean, in the case of Mission, it's like you know, as a cinematographer, sure, you have the practical and technical elements to deal with in such a large scale, on such a large scale, but you know.
Yeah, but there's also a huge amount of coverage for all the action, whereas in Ex Machina, you're much more, you know, you're sitting on images and you're doing lovely moves that are very intentional. You cross the line a lot, and that puts people slightly on edge, and so there is a very different pace to it. I mean, understandably, because of the story.
Complete contrast. Yeah, complete contrast, but the principle is the same. I mean, in terms of Mission, it's like I watched that clip and I know every single image. I know every single image because I framed every single image. We had one of those rare occasions where there was no second unit on that film, so everything had to rely on just this core group of people to tell this story with this sense of proximity. And I don't think really in the previous Mission films they'd explored that idea. And I know that, you know, they had their fingers burnt a little bit on the one prior to that, but with Ex Machina, again, it was, you know, we created that space, and we had to tell a story in a similar way to the bathroom sequence, where you have two people that are effectively sort of psychologically circling each other. And when you position things in a certain way, like, for example, I had, there were lots of lines of light in there, and lots of reflections, which we embraced. But I also had these practicals built that were lines that would create reflections. So whenever you repositioned a camera, and Alex likes to do things, likes to let the image breathe, and I think that's also something which is very evident here. And a similar, actually, in your clip with Son of Saul, it's like the images are allowed to breathe. And I think from an audience perspective, that becomes that much more visceral, personally, and kind of engaging. That said, the car chase is the opposite of that, in a way. But again, in my mind, it has the same sort of effect. But as those images, in the case of Ex Machina, as those images are allowed to breathe, things develop, and there's a real sort of specificity to the positioning of the camera and the positioning of, say, Ava and her relationship to Caleb, and those things would sort of align. So it would be almost as if you were looking at like a three-dimensional or even four-dimensional image, if you like, that you could walk around and or you could sort of move in your hands, and you could see things just align, and then you move through it and you come back around.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those points had a sort of narrative purpose. Like every single one of those.
I mean, the pacing is very specific,
Yeah.
and there's a sensuality there that is just in the speed of their dialogue and especially her, the way she speaks, things like that, and that gives it a certain. But I
think just in the context of what we're talking about, it to me, obviously in filmmaking we're not talking about singular images necessarily. It's a collection of images, and there are so many reasons why those things can work and they don't work. And as cinematographers, we can do our best to help those things align. The things that Ellen was talking about, like the importance of blocking and certain decisions that you're going to make in terms of lighting and how those things then inhabit, to me, how they inhabit a space. And it's like I'm not a musician. I wanted to be. I can't play a single instrument. It's terrible. But I'm sort of slightly obsessed by the way in which music is recorded. And you can hear the difference between one person recording the same song as you can another. But the difference is also in the room in which, say, it's been recorded. And I think those things to me are fascinating because it's the shape of a space that informs each instrument and the way it sounds. And it's the same with images. It's the same with the collection of images that we produce in any given context, in a scene or in a space, that by combining those things it has this sort of singular effect which feels almost as if you're watching one image, but you're not. Obviously you're watching a collection. I'm sort of talking around in circles here.
No, but thank you for that, and it's good to leave it on that note, so that we can go to Daniel Landin's film. He did Under the Skin, which was, I can't remember when. What year was that? 10 years ago, which was absolutely surreal. I mean, it's a film that is unique, and this year. There's been lots of films that are surreal, Triangle of Sadness, Bardo, The Menu, and they've all gone into the surreal, but he was one of the first to make a film 10 years ago that was completely out there and shot in an incredibly different way. So let's have a look at what he's chosen, and let's talk about it with Daniel.
The simple central story idea of the film, this alien becomes sort of infected with the sense of identity.
I wanted that character to be in disguise. I like the idea of taking somebody who was well known and putting them in disguise. And that had to be, how do we shoot that? Let's do that with hidden cameras. Let's do that so we can really film her walking down a street and nobody knows it's her.
For me, it was absolutely thrilling. When we first started doing that kind of covert stuff, you become incredibly self-conscious. All those things are just kind of life happening around this character.
Scarlett's character was interacting with real people who were completely unaware that they were in a fictional film.
We were shooting half an hour unbroken takes of improvised dialogue with 8 cameras simultaneously, which is like a feature's worth of photography. We had to build a whole ecosystem that's basically all the components of a camera that could either be stuck together or separated and used in a number of different modular ways. And you've got nobody shouting action, cut, reset. You know, none of those normal constraints exist. The set is there, you're in it, but the rest of it all comes from the outside and reality.
This is one of the one-cam sensor units. This has got a large cinema-style lens mount on it. It had to be able to work in all these different scenarios, whether it's in a vehicle, on a motorbike.
In the nightclub and in the shopping centre, we were filming the people and her with these hidden cameras. Our character was dropped into the real world, and we were, at that point, documenting what happened.
The whole idea of putting Scarlett in disguise as a Trojan horse, you know, putting her in there undetected. You're taking the film to people, you know, rather than bringing people to the film, you're taking it to people. It's quite intoxicating. You could easily get lost shooting like that.
Jonathan was able to kind of capture life on film in a way that I don't think anybody's ever really seen before.
That striving for authenticity and reality, that was his sort of barometer for it.
You start with a feeling, and then you grow images out to try and describe that feeling, and then you try and turn those images into a story.
What it gets you, again, is something that you have almost never seen in cinema.
Tonight, didn't I?
Have you got any change left for the meter?
No, not if you want me to phone Boris after.
Bastard. Phone him instead. Get some money off him.
I'm off down Lowell's now.
Will I see you tomorrow?
Yeah, probably.
Let's stop it there, Eddie, please. So I want to have enough time to talk to Daniel before we have to stop.
Hang on, I want to see the last bit.
What?
Can you play the last clip?
Well, then you won't have too much time to talk. That's the thing.
I just want to see the last clip because I want to talk about that.
Okay. Well, let's see the last bit then.
It's not the famous one, but I just want
Okay.
to play that.
Okay.
It's important.
Okay.
If you had loved me, you would have been.
No.
Can we go back?
There's no going back. The hour is up.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about the last one because I remember you talking to me.
Yeah, I just thought that it's a film no one's seen yet. It's not even out yet. But it's for me, I think it reminded me that image making is not about everything that the cinematographer kind of strives for, and I think it's quite important to remember that you can have all the perfection and all the control of everything, and the film might not be any good, you know. And so I was using a Sony stills camera with automatic focus and all the horrible menu systems and all that kind of thing that you have to deal with. And I had all sorts of problems when I saw what we'd achieved with that shot, and I was kind of frustrated that I could feel the focus fighting, and you know, but nevertheless, I think fundamentally the filmmaker, and that's not always the cinematographer, obviously, is the best judge of what that image is doing. And I think that there's a lot of great films that are made with all sorts of compromises, and most people watching them are not cinematographers, and they're not looking at those errors that we all look at. So for me, that's why I wanted to show it, because I think it's an interesting example of that, where emotion, music, movement, I think, you know, comes together. But it took a little while for me to stop worrying about the flaws. You know, I'd much rather have had a focus puller on that film. You know, it was pretty scary going into something without a real camera and all these kind of things. But I think sometimes, you know, obviously for us as professionals, if you can get onto that project where there's some content then actually your job's done before you turn up to a certain extent, because you could be not that great at your job, but if the thing in front of the camera is interesting, you know, that's going to inform a lot of those images. So that's really what I wanted to say. And in fact, I was talking to a director yesterday, and I was telling him about the clips I was going to show here. And he told me how he'd been on a film, and this is a very successful director, Oscar winning for other stuff, but he said he'd been on a film with all the equipment and the crew and the anamorphic 35mm cameras and that, and everything had been conspiring to stop him making a good film, because the physicality of the camera department, the focus pullers, the weather, you know, he couldn't get the shots he wanted because he had all the best camera equipment. You know, and so he was saying, well, I can see your point there, you know. So that's really what I wanted to use that clip to illustrate, that you can do things with a phone that are great, you know. Not to say, you know, our job isn't important, but I think for us, I think we have to enter from the kind of inside out and sort of find the core of what's being said and then use the imagery to say that, you know. And obviously, normally, in a lot of situations, you get all sorts of big range opportunities and equipment and ways to do that, you know. But
as you're saying, it doesn't make a better film.
Yeah.
It's all about the content. It's all about the emotions. It's all about good writing. It's all about all these things, and good images. And you know, your films always have good images. You know, Under the Skin was extraordinary. I mean, to this day, people talk about it. And so it's a combination of all those things that work incredibly well. I don't think we have much time, but if there's anybody who wants to ask questions, please stand up and we'll give you a microphone.
Hello, thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah. I wanted to ask a question. When you have a big crew of operators in different countries in a bigger project, for example, like Europe on Mission, how do you make sure that the composition and kind of deliberate framing and the style of it is completed throughout with having such a large crew? Thank you.
Did you get that?
Yeah. You rule with an iron fist. And no, I think ultimately it's part of our job, I think, as cinematographers is it's a management thing, and it's logistics, of course, but it's also to inspire people who are working with you, alongside you, because film is ultimately, you know, it's the biggest collaborative art form there is in terms of art, making art. So I think the job is to really to ensure people, to get people on board and into the headspace of what is the aesthetic that you want to achieve with this, and ensure that everybody enjoys that idea, and the sense that they can bring something to that, and that they can join that you know, that sort of team playing aspect, I guess. Everybody has a different aesthetic, of course. So sometimes there are, you know, you have to kind of guide it a little or a lot. But from a logistical point of view, you know, I think it's like in your mind, you just have to try and see it not to sort of be intimidated by the scale of things, but more to just make sure that you're pushing forward this idea that you had, irrespective of what kind of movie it is that when we all read our scripts and there's an image that comes to mind, well, there is for me anyway, and you want to stick to that seed of an idea, and it often gets lost through the process, but I think if you can instill that, keep that image with you and instill that idea and inspire people that you're working with, specifically the operators, you know, you'll find people who you work with, and that's it. It's a job for life. In fact, I was talking about Marcus Polis earlier. Marcus helped me on it. He's a brilliant camera operator who I met a few years ago, and we share the same aesthetic. So it's pure trust, absolute trust, and also we inform each other. So I think when you get to that point, it can be a real joy
Any other questions? The microphone here at the front, please. I know I'm not meant to be carrying on.
Probably hear you from me.
But seems a shame to stop.
I've just got a question about fallibility and how you create a space on sets when we're under the sort of time pressure and the realities of a film shoot to push the edges of things. You need to be able to be fallible, and I don't think there's a lot of space created for that in filmmaking. And when you're trying to get there with your images, how do you...
Who are you asking?
Any of you, really, but across the board, do you create a space for that, for you to be able to be fallible on set and make mistakes and...
Fallibility.
Yeah.
Making mistakes on set.
Making mistakes on set.
I think that's about who you choose to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that happens at the point where you choose to work with someone or they choose to work with you, and it's a rare thing. A film set can sustain fallibility, and normally it has to be done in secret, because you're not supposed to have it, but if you find someone trustworthy who has some authority themselves, then they're the people to collaborate with. If they have integrity and respect and trust and a content, fundamentally, if they don't have anything to say, you've got a problem, I was talking to an old gaffer once. I was on a really appalling film, and he said to me, "Does the director have a vision?" And I realized I couldn't say yes, and that was a project I didn't stay on for very long. But he was a kind of salty old gaffer who'd been through a lot of stuff. He retired, but we were just having dinner, and he said, "Does the director have a vision?" And of course, not all directors necessarily do, but when they do, they're the ones to stick with, and they can help you find that image, right?
We're always making mistakes.
Any other questions? Over there. Maybe stand up just so that we can see you. Thank you.
Hello. I just think that the pictures we had at the beginning, they were really interesting. They were really evoking. And since each one of you, it's in the field of imagery and visual stuff, I was just wondering which one was your favorite picture and why?
Well, I chose the picture, so I suppose you're talking to me.
No, I actually want to know each one of you, like which one was your favorite picture and why?
Well, they had never seen them before. I put this together more as an example of the different energies that I talked about at the beginning, and about potential energy and reflective energy and visceral energies. So they were just demonstrations. But they're all beautiful images, and they're all strong in their own right. It's difficult to pick one out of all of them because they're for different.
Pick one, John. Pick one.
I'll tell you mine, John.
Yeah, go on.
It's a Saul Leiter one.
Yeah, the Saul Leiters.
I would
it's like
say
a painting.
Yeah, the Saul Leiter.
That's my one.
No question.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, it is beautiful. It's out of focus. It's great. It's for that reason. It's more beautiful, and one should always consider all the trickery that we have to make good images, and it can come out of all sorts of things. They're not about being sharp.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Madame, here right at the front.
I had a question about influencing the blocking, because I think that's such a delicate balance as a DP when you're working with the director. And I know you direct yourself, but you're saying how important that is in your process in terms of, where it leads you to place the camera. And if you're happy to talk a bit more about that, I suppose, and how you sort of do that with that dance without stepping on the director's toes, and obviously, in tandem with the cast.
Can you repeat the question? It's hard for me to hear.
The blocking.
The blocking. Well, when you think about blocking, the first thing it comes from is the script for me. When you think about what the story is, when you're reading the script and you're thinking about you know, the story you want to tell, and then the space in which you're working. And, you know, as Rob was saying, you know, the space is really important and where the characters are going to go. And what was interesting is about what Dan did in his last piece is the blocking change of the characters. It was really interesting because when you first started, we were frontal to the young woman, but we were on the side of the young man. And then he came around to the back of her and he stayed out of focus, and the focus comes onto her. So it was really interesting about how the point of view of that shot changed because of the blocking, you know. So it's almost like if you have a certain room and you have a character, there's a character in the foreground or there's a character, you know, in the background. If there's a conflict, let's say, and they walk in the room in the background, is the focus on the person in the foreground, the person walks to, let's say, a window. Do you rack focus or not? Oh. Yeah, that you know, you have to be really very, you know, diplomatic about that, because sometimes the actors want to dictate where they go. Oftentimes they'll say, well, I don't feel it here. But you can actually, if you're there at a rehearsal or a blocking rehearsal, go to the director and say, you know, if they walk over here, you know, I can put the camera over there, and then you get this thing kind of going on. So it's really important to give the director the idea in their mind's eye, his or her mind's eye, so that they can see it, so they understand why you're asking for that. Otherwise, they'll be like, well, why? You know what I mean? Can they go over to the window? Well, yeah, because the light is really great there, and if they're walking out the window, you know, it's a great side light. But I think putting it in that way, where it's about how it helps to tell the narrative or the drama, really, really helps. And that's the way, you know, if I'm lurking in the background, I'll just go up and be very discreet about it, you know, and maybe they'll be able to influence that, maybe not. There are times when I would tell an actor, there's that window for you if you want to use it, you know, hint, hint, you know what I mean? And sometimes they'll turn to it or not, but, you know, one hopes sometimes, but you have to be really diplomatic about that kind of stuff, because, you know, you're treading in territory. So, but that's why I think it's really important to spend a lot of time with the director in the beginning. You sit for hours and hours and talk about the scenes and go through what's in the director's mind's eye, and what's the story they want to tell. So you're creating a common language between you, so that when you're on set, you know, it's not like one person's doing one thing and the other. You're kind of starting to execute what you had already talked about.
So you coming from cinematography and now directing mostly, but you know, maybe not exclusively. How different how different do you think about that thing, or is it the same thing, but you've got a bit more responsibility?
Well, a lot more responsibility.
Yeah.
Not to say being a cinematographer is great.
You still think the same way? Are you still thinking?
You
the same
do.
way?
You think the same way, thinking the same way about blocking. Just thinking about that when you get your location, and that's why the locations are really important to find as soon as you can. You get in the location, you're there with the director. That's also a great place where you can influence blocking, because they can then tell the actors where to go. And you go and you just do out the beats yourselves together. I always do diagrams on the side where I just put stick figures in and see where people are going, so I can also understand what the coverage may be. Or if you're going to do a moving master, you know, where the camera goes and where that's moving and where they're going. I mean, constantly in Eternal Sunshine, the blocking was very diverse, because we couldn't pre-plan it with Michel. You know, he wanted to be extemporaneous. So when we would get in there, the actors would come in, you know, and they would say, okay, we're going to go here, here, and here. And then sometimes I could influence, but sometimes we were constantly moving in the shot during the scene. My other camera, I would say, okay, you go over there, take her, and then walk over there, and I'll be over here, and I'll avoid you going around. So that's, you know, it was a choreography. It's basically choreography. You're a choreographer.
No, but I was trying to find out more about you as a director. So you're also a cinematographer, but as a director, but also a cinematographer at the same time.
Yeah, but I think...
Does that make it... What's the difference?
The difference is I've always thought about, how to... I mean, in terms of blocking and meaning, I've always thought about it in that way. That's why I've been able to help directors to... I help them to realize their vision. Okay. And that's helped me a lot as a director because I'm already thinking about that. I'm not just thinking about, I haven't already just thought about shots. I'm already thinking about the story and how to tell the story.
Well, I think I've got this red light here that's telling me that we're not allowed to carry on. I'd love to thank Ellen, Rob, and Daniel so much for a great talk. Thanks, guys.